Hi, okay, so this is the third episode of my podcast, and in my mind, I'm like, well, I did those first two episodes, and when I do them, I'm like, oh, that was okay. And, but the thing is that as I look back on them, then I realize that they're total shit. And it doesn't matter if they were objectively total shit. I'm just saying that from my perspective, I understand as time goes on that, oh, actually, it was terrible. Because that's just the way that I feel about it. The more that I think about it by default, the more that like, maybe that has something to do with just thinking about it at all. Like maybe you just naturally reflect on things that you did. Maybe you just naturally reflect badly on the things that you did in the past if you're reflecting on them at all. Because if you are thinking about the things you did in the past at all, like probably the best way that they could ever possibly be is just the way that they happened when you did them. And if you were able to let it be, if you're able to let your actions rest in peace, that's probably the best way that you can think about them rather than trying to rewrite them. But you can think about them again. It's just that I'm thinking, like, that's an argument to me. Is it every time that you think about something that happened in the past that lessens the real impact of it to you? Because the best way that it could possibly come across is just if you let it happen and then let it go. Probably. That's probably the way for you to feel the most positive about it. But you can, like, obviously you would think you can recall a memory and remember. Maybe it's just as long as you remember them positively. But pretty much any time that you're fixating on a memory, that's a negative thing, probably, if you're fixating on a memory. But, well, maybe it just has to do with if you're thinking about how you did, if you're thinking about how it went, if something you did, how did it go? Anytime it's in that category, then it is negative. How did the thing I do go? Did it go over well? That is automatically negative. Because what conclusion could you possibly arrive at when you're thinking about that past thing? Like a presentation you gave. Like, oh, did it go well? If you're asking yourself that, you yourself think that it went poorly. But I digress. I digress from nothing, because this is pretty much what I started talking about was this subject. I don't digress. So what am I saying? I'm saying that if you're like, how did it go? It's not like it went bad to other people, but to you, it's something that you have to try to make right, apparently. It's only at the point that you're like, whatever, that you can let it go, right? So, and you do that with all your memories. That's the thing. Like, if you're thinking about a memory, you're not letting it go, even if you are thinking about it positively. Like, if you're thinking about it, you're not letting it go. You are living in the past a little bit. So it's not a bad thing to think about a memory positively, but it does keep you from moving forward to some degree. But nobody is absolutely able to not think about the past or anything like that. So it's not a vice to reflect on memories, and especially to reflect on them positively, but it does keep you from moving on to some degree. And depending on what your expectations are for moving on or for accomplishing things, then you should view it as worse when you are living in the past and only reflecting on memories. Because if half the time you spent is reflecting on memories and thinking about that things could have gone better in your life, if half of your energy is put towards that, like that's what you talk about, if just half of that's what you talk about or half of that's what you think about, then you are half living in the past. And there's something to be said about where you are in relationship to the present and in relationship to reality and to the people around you. If half of your energy is spent in the past and is spent in a time that other people aren't a part of, you know, and because if half your energy is spent in the past, like, your past is specific to you. So if half your energy is spent in the past, that's like half the time you are entirely selfish because you're living in a reality that only you know about, and that you're the only one that is consistent through that reality is your past. You're the consistent element through your entire past, and besides that, you are the more that you are living in the past, really, besides that, you are doing that, like, you are doing that because you're trying to make things better and remember a more perfect outcome for yourself, when there isn't possibly a more perfect outcome, because the only outcome that there is already happened, and that is the best possible outcome by default. What actually happened in the past is the best possible outcome by default because it's the only outcome. It's what actually happened. And so you can't go into the past and try to make things better, because that's madness. That's insanity. You know how everybody in the world thinks they're cool because they know that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again that you did before and expecting a different result, and that's the definition of insanity based on somebody's opinion. Like, we don't need to limit ourselves to whoever it was that originated that opinion of insanity, because there's many different opinions for insanity, and the reason why we then are drawn toward this one and we're interested in it is because it's pretty relatively truthful. It's a good definition for it, but there are plenty of definitions out there, and the reason why we want to have a definition for it is because it is an undefinable thing, insanity. Like, that's something that everybody could have a perspective on and have a different definition on, the same way like everybody has a different definition on leadership. Like, leadership is undefinable, and you know that because they ask that in interview questions and there's always a different answer. It's something that everybody has a different perspective on. What is leadership? And I feel like insanity would be the same thing, but it's not like that's going to have the same focus that leadership does, because leadership is seen as something that we should try to attain, and insanity is not. But what was I saying? I was saying that insanity was, like, insanity is like another definition for it besides that one that everyone knows, is you trying to make perfect things that already happened, or trying to rewrite the past is basically insanity. Because when you're rewriting the past, you're trying to make something perfect that is already imperfect, but more so than that, something that has already been perfected because it's already happened.